Ah, hello, I'm LemonBread, and Christmas time is finally officially here. The snow has fallen, decorations are up, Mariah Carey is playing in every grocery store across the nation, and I'm finally done with this tree. It took me nearly 4 months to make, but I finally finished it. Now that that's over and there's how long till Christmas, I need something to tie me over until the big day. Just what am I going to do? Christmas games. Because of all the ways of spending the holiday season, passing the time with family, sharing gifts under the tree, drinking hot cocoa by the fire on a cold wintry day, fuck all that, who wouldn't want to play as Santa? I never said I was above it. With Christmas being such a commercialized holiday, it makes sense that some developers would want to cash in and make a quick buck on all the hype around the season. It's the perfect plan. Make a quick Christmas game to cash in on the holiday hype, sell it to people likely looking for an easy Christmas gift on the cheap, and money go up. But despite this, you don't see a lot of Christmas-specific games out there. I guess it's the fact that games already take long enough to develop, so making a game solely based on Christmas would just be a waste of time. Or the fact that these games are only relevant a few months out of the year, so their shelf life is especially low. It's a mystery. That's why you more so tend to see Christmas themes in video games, or games taking place on Christmas, rather than outright Christmas games. It's the reason why Wikipedia lists Batman Arkham Origins and Bayonetta 2 as Christmas games, when they're not true Christmas games. This is not a good start for talking about Santa Claus. Instead, a lot of games choose Christmas-themed sections for their games, thereby eliminating both problems with making a Christmas-specific game, yet still retaining some of that Christmas spirit. Donkey Kong Country 3, for example, has a hidden holiday-themed level, and You're the Inspiration from Alibi Agents is the only level in the game to make me weep. But as interesting as those things are, it's just not jolly enough, innit? I mean, yeah, these are all well and good, don't get me wrong, but what I really want is an actual Christmas game. I want to feel like Santa. I want to feel like Santa! This is not a good start for talking about Santa Claus. This is the early Christmas-themed video game I could find. Special Delivery Santa's Christmas Chaos for the Commodore 64, released in 1984. I'm sure there are examples before this, but if this was the best you could do in 1984, I shudder to think of what it was like before this point. The game is relatively simple. You pilot what is either supposed to be Santa Claus or a girl with a long ponytail as you careen through the night skies in search of presents sent down by angels, while avoiding obstacles like clouds, mountains, and lightning. Now, if you do run into them, our ponytailed Santa goes and loses a gift, of which you have to collect a certain amount within a certain amount of hours. Thank God it's not in real time. Of course, me being me, I didn't realize that these were obstacles for a while and had thought that Santa going was a bug in the emulator. I must have gone through at least like 2 other emulators before I realized I had to avoid these obstacles. It's not like you can blame me though, these look exactly like background elements and some of them are so closely packed together, you will almost have to go through them to get forward. I guess this was in a time where the sense of scale in video games wasn't as defined as it is now, because when it is time to deliver gifts, you go from a hulking monolith of a man to a small ant in a chimney dodging fire, then to a taller than average ant as you deliver gifts to some lovely Christmas joys. And just listen to that sound design. I could fall asleep to this. I can't really slight it for these weird discrepancies given that it is a Commodore 64 game. This was really the best they could do, and as it is a fine game. I'd found myself having quite a bit of fun with it. It's just not enough to get me into that Christmas spirit. It's dull, slow, repetitive, not unlike other games of its ilk. And that stuff just isn't going to get me into the festive mood. If we really want to get into the Christmas spirit, we have to fast forward to much later.
Merry Christmas.
Now this is more like it. Days Before Christmas, a game I have a lot of history with. I was at my grandma's house one day when I found this on an SNES emulator site. Played it once and then forgot about it. Lot of history. Now, from the get-go, this game reeks of that Christmas charm. I know it's not a high bar to cross, but it is leagues better than the presentation of Santa's Christmas Chaos. I really love the artwork here. It's so cute and full of life that I can't help but smile at it. Hell, in quite a few areas it reminded me of Rayman 1 with its painterly vibes. Perhaps not as good looking as Rayman, but it still has a similar charm to it, which I do appreciate. The level select being an advent calendar is a really nice touch, and the music as well, while far from the best the system has to offer, is part of what makes this game so endearing, especially the first level song. They did not have to go as hard as they did here, but they did. Apparently this game never came out in America. Don't know what we did to deserve that, but alright. At least Europe and Australia got the game, so we have those countries to count on. In the game you play as Santa, again, though no ponytail sadly, who must rescue all of his kidnapped elves, collecting presents along the way, all while dodging enemies and the like. It's a simple premise, but it gets the job done, I suppose. The gameplay is pretty simple, it's your standard platformer of the time. There's also this coffee power-up, which turns Santa into Anti-Santa, granting you invincibility and extra speed for a short time, and it's really not that good. I don't recommend it. There's a few other fun ideas here. I especially like these flying stages, even if they're a cinch to get through. And oh, that's why this game never came out here. But other than the Christmas theme, there's not a lot to distinguish this from other platformers, and once you remove the cheery veneer, it just relegates it to a fairly bland 2D platformer. Now, to be fair, my expectations weren't really that high going into it, so I was pleasantly surprised to find that this game wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. But this alone does not make for a good game, and it's clear to see from what I played that this game is not that. One of the biggest problems I had with the game is that the camera is just too zoomed in, which makes platforming a real challenge since there are quite a few nigh-on leaps of faith where I don't know where I'm going, which leads to a lot of deaths. And it's not like Santa's controls really help with this either. Who'd have thought Fatman would be so slippery to control? You move fast in this game. Too fast, almost. That, alongside some floaty jumps, makes the game feel really imprecise to play. And because you move so fast, there's little reaction time for oncoming enemies or pits. In some levels, you pretty much have to be spamming the attack button lest you get hit by something you didn't see coming. As for the levels themselves, I found quite a few of them to be fairly underwhelming, with themes that range from sensible to confusing. What the hell is Santa doing down here? Paired with some uninspired platforming challenges and equally uninspired bosses, you've got yourself some not good level design, that's for sure. The doctor said it's terminal. It's not entirely bad though, it's just another mediocre platformer for the SNES, which was a console rife with them. As much as I've been bashing in the game, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have any fun with it, which is why I kept on pressing through despite its shortcomings. But when the game started blatantly reusing previous level environments and ideas, that's when I lost interest. So instead I looked up a password to beat the final boss, which was another slouch, and now I can finally say I've technically beaten Daze Before Christmas. Well, that was a disappointment. That didn't help at all. Like, yeah, this game is technically better than the last one, but I don't feel any jollier because of it. This game reeks of that Christmas charm, but a lot of it feels kind of bland and generic. Not like there's anything wrong with that, but is it enough to last an entire game? Clearly not, because the developers ran out of ideas halfway through. I think if we want to find something that will truly get us into the festive spirit, we need to look for something a bit more familiar. And what better way to get familiar with the Christmas season than with movies? Christmas movies are a cornerstone of society. Ever since the dawn of filmmaking, holiday movies have been around to provide comfort during the holiday season, and there are some classics, movies that are just as, if not more recognizable than non-holiday flicks. A Christmas Story, The Grinch, Elf, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, It's a Wonderful Life, A Charlie Brown Christmas, the list goes on. And video games have been an important outlet for movies to express themselves, with movie tie-ins being almost as prevalent as movies sometimes. So it's a no-brainer to take some of the most revered Christmas movies out there and convert them into a video game, right? Right? Well, why not try one of the most famous Christmas movies out there, Home Alone, on the Genesis. Home Alone is arguably one of the most irreverent Christmas movies out there. The mixture of childlike wonder at the prospect of being home alone, alongside some iconic slapstick humor, memorable quotes, and some sentimentality thrown in there, has cemented this film as being one of the most played Christmas movies on television during the holidays. It is inescapable. And with the movie racking in almost $500 million at the box office, it's no wonder that a home console adaptation would soon follow. And follow it did, as this game received versions on pretty much all of the major home consoles at the time. NES, SNES, Genesis, and Master System were among the home console ports of this game, alongside handheld ports like for the Game Boy and Game Gear, as well as Amiga and DOS versions, all of these having slight differences from one another. For the purposes of this video, I am playing the Genesis version, but your experience could wildly differ from platform to platform. The general gameplay of the Genesis version is more akin to a puzzle platformer, where a lot of emphasis is placed on preparing yourself for the wet bandits by setting traps and gathering resources and the like. Of course, there's only so long before the wet bandits start making their way downtown. You only get a time limit of 20 minutes for the entire game in fact, so you have to act rather quickly lest you're too unprepared and they loot all the houses in the neighborhood. Of course, this is me telling you this after scrolling through a bunch of walkthroughs and the Wikipedia article. What do you get when you actually start the game? This was in an age where there were far less tutorials or explanations in video games. Now, there are good ways of showing a player how a game works without these tutorials. Things like SMB's 1.1 or the beginning of Half-Life 2 come to mind here, but a lot of games back then would rather just throw you into the thick of it and expect you to know where to go from there. Now, I guess it is somewhat my fault since I don't have the instruction manual for this game since I'm playing it on an emulator, and a lot of the brunt of a game's info lies in those manuals. But as a result, it took me a long time to figure out what I was doing, even with the assistance of a walkthrough. I can't imagine a kid in the 90s would fare any better. But if you don't get it, I got it. Doesn't mean I'm any good at it though. This game is stressful, man. You almost have to be perfect in how you prepare yourself in this game because even though 20 minutes seems like a long time, the game is awfully stringent about how much time you have to prepare. A lot of the beginning of the game is spent careening around as fast as possible, gathering supplies and setting traps in various houses before the wet bandits arrive. The gameplay loop inside of these houses is spent running around looking for more supplies, ammo, and overall avoiding the wet bandits to stop them from flooding the houses. There's a pretty unique weapon crafting system here where you have to locate 3 different parts of a weapon before crafting it. A platform, which dictates the weapon's shot type such as bazooka or rifle, operator, what is used to launch ammo, and ammo, which determines how long and in what manner the wet bandits are stunned, such as frozen or glued. For a game of its caliber, it's a complex system but works pretty well in execution. You'll be thinking of myriads of different ways for things to go together. It all has to be fairly specific though, some items aren't compatible with others, so a lot of searching has to be done inside and out of these houses. Speaking of houses, it is kinda weird that you go into other people's houses other than your own for this game, which are all devoid of life in their own right. But having to micromanage all of the different aspects of this game, supplies, ammo, time limit, it all builds up really quickly. Hell, there were times when it almost seemed reminiscent of survival horror. Now, I'm not saying this game is giving Silent Hill, but just hear me out. There are a lot of things in this game that make it way more stressful than it should be though. For example, the wet bandits can get in the way super easily since if you make contact with one of them, they'll pick you up and hang you from a clothes hook, which forces you to start at the beginning of the floor you're currently on. And a lot of times it seems almost inescapable. There were plenty of moments where I was surrounded Pac-Man style and had no choice but to be caught, or moments where I couldn't go further in the house since there was a man in the way. They're easy to circumnavigate if you have sufficient ammo or traps set up, but if you have neither, then you'll be mashing the D-pad to get free a lot. It can also be really hard to keep track of where the wet bandits are in the suburbs. They'll roam around the map a bit before going into one of the houses, but with an area as big as this, it can be easy to get lost, and before you know it, one of the houses will become flooded. Now, they do go in a preset order in the beginner's difficulty, so after some time it'll become easier to find out where they're going next, but in the expert difficulty, everything is far more randomized, including where the wet bandits are going to. And with everything being so scarce as well, the game can almost seem unfair for those reasons. Plus, while setting traps is fun, it doesn't feel as rewarding as it is in the movie. It is fun seeing the bandits fall into your traps, but where's the bucket swing? Or that one nail scene I always had to look away from. I guess I can't fault the game too much for this since it is a Genesis game from the 90s, but it just doesn't really feel as rewarding as seeing it happen in the movie. But even for these qualms, I can't necessarily say it's bad as a result. There's almost a certain rush to playing this game. Having to micromanage all of these things can be almost exhilarating at times, and I'd be lying if I said this game wasn't fun. Constantly running around the house, looking for things that just might work together, and avoiding the bandits all come together in a surprisingly fun and enjoyable experience. The presentation isn't half bad either. It's probably one of the best looking versions of this game, and I found the music to be surprisingly decent. Certainly not a perfect game, don't get me wrong, but dare I say I found a hidden gem on the Genesis. Well, that's more like it. Yeah, this game isn't the best the Genesis has to offer, but it is heaps better than the previous two games. I guess it was my expectations being rather low that helped with the enjoyment of this game, but I still don't have a hard time recommending it. But who knows, maybe movie games are the way to go. Lord knows there's a plethora of them running around. You know they made an Elf game on the Game Boy Advance? Well, why not look at another movie game on even more advanced hardware? The Grinch is a household name you all recognize. Starting life as arguably one of Dr. Seuss's most famous and memorable books, it was later adapted into a classic TV special that plays nearly every year. I really love this special. It adapts the tone of the book in such a good way, and it's become as, if not more irreverent than the book it's based off of. Sadly, we're not here to talk about the 1966 special, we're here to talk about the 2000s movie with Jim Carrey. More specifically, the video game adaptation. An adaptation of an adaptation of an adaptation. Now, I used to love the original TV special when I was a kid. I could barely tell you anything about the 2000s movie. I could probably tell you some of the individual scenes from this movie. Once you've seen some of the parts from it, it really sticks with you. But as a whole, it's kind of a blur. I remember it being okay though, it's perfectly serviceable as a remake, but who knows, maybe this video game will help me in remembering. And right off the bat, they're not cutting any corners here. Instead of how the Grinch stole Christmas, it's just the Grinch. And there he is. Immediately the game gets you directly in the story.
I got it! I have a great idea. This year, the Who's will pay.
And I guess the title isn't the only thing they were cutting corners on. There's really not any sense of conflict here. They do nothing to explain or show why the Grinch is so resentful towards Christmas, something the movie spends a lot of time on. Instead, they just kinda go,
I hate Christmas!
and call it a day. Benefit of the doubt, the target audience for this game is likely already familiar with the original story. But so am I, and I'm still talking about it. Anyways, the Grinch, who is definitely Jim Carrey, trust me, plans on ruining Christmas with a variety of different gadgets and gizmos, but a freak accident occurs and the blueprints are scattered, leaving our sickly green friend to search for them himself, all while doing various missions along the way to finally get his comeuppance. And so the Grinch sets off, first to Whoville, hell-bent on ruining the Who's cheer and retrieving those blueprints, and it's a lot more desolate than I remember. I could have sworn the 2000s film had hundreds of extras in there. Here, it just seems far more empty. I'm guessing this is more of a hardware issue than anything, but the game has that feeling of just being empty overall. You could have at least added some background noise if anything. In each world, there are a set number of missions to complete. They're not the main focus of the game, that would lie in the blueprints, but some of them are required to move on to later levels here to collect certain blueprints. These tasks somewhat have something to do with the movie, but feel less like you're stealing Christmas and more like you're just annoying people. Like, yeah, this is inconvenient, but it feels less like I'm playing the Grinch and more like I'm playing Untitled Goose Game. Regardless, a good chunk of the game is spent roaming around relatively open worlds in search of tasks you must complete as the Grinch. And I gotta say, these graphics, they're definitely not the worst thing in the world, far from the worst in the PS1 for that matter. It's vibrant enough to match the darker tone of the movie with the cheery atmosphere of Whoville, but it's just not the most inspired thing in the world. In a few cases, it kinda gave off Spyro the Dragon vibes. I guess the flatter looking landscapes and similar-ish color schemes kinda give off that vibe, but it doesn't really feel derivative because of it. It's just a comparison I noted while playing. One thing you've probably already noticed is that the render distance here is really bad. You'll see a lot of models and textures especially, not pop in until you're a few feet away. I guess this was a performance thing? Maybe, but other PS1 games had perfectly fine render distances and ran perfectly well. I mean, this game came out the same year as Year of the Dragon, and that game, while not perfect, still looks perfectly cromulent for its age. So either this is a hardware issue, or the Grinch is just nearsighted. Who knows? The models are especially iffy. They represent what they're supposed to be fine enough. They just look really flat and not appealing at all. But enough about how this game looks. How does it play? As I said, a lot of this game is spent roaming around open worlds and doing various tasks. These range from destroying a certain amount of items to solving puzzles and the like. It works for the Grinch, I suppose. I can't really think of what else you'd do in a Grinch game, but it's not really the greatest when it comes to these. A lot of the missions feel really redundant. Most of them, from what I found, just have you repeat something a certain amount of times. Some of the more puzzle-oriented ones stand out a bit more as a result, but that doesn't mean the puzzles are particularly good. Quite often I found them to be more obtuse than anything. This gear puzzle, for example, took me a whopping 12 plus minutes to get through because I didn't realize you had to push this cog in with the help of this box. Earlier in the puzzle they had you push cogs with the help of other cogs. I just thought that it would be something similar with this one, I guess, and since the previous room had you push a box into a platform, for the longest time I assumed that's all of what you had to do here. It was almost embarrassing the amount of time it took for me to complete this one task. It gets really cumbersome after a while. This mail shuffling mission, too, can only be accessed by putting on a disguise mirroring the Who cloak in the movie. Kinda. But the only way to access this cloak is with these phone booths, which, to my eyes, just seemed like regular parts of the world, so I ignored them. And the only hint they give you about this is, if only you could not be recognized. Perhaps these issues could be chalked up with me not being familiar with the source material. But this game came out a week before the movie, so I really don't know what to think. Plus, its bleakness is weirdly inconsistent. The game explains to you a lot of things when you first begin. You can't even go 4 feet without a tutorial happening.
The Grinch likes to break things with his robust behind.
So, when it comes to something that can actually confuse younger players, why does the game just skip out? Well, anyways, after doing some stuff in Whoville,
Yeah, Grinch!
the Grinch moves on to the Who Forest, which I don't think is a location in the movie, but alright. Good on the devs for thinking outside the box. And I think this is where some of the problems with the platforming and roaming around the world start to take shape. The Grinch doesn't particularly control the greatest. Running around and jumping are perfectly fine, but when it comes to certain maneuvers, the Grinch struggles. So when it got to this part, where you have to swing on a bunch of branches to scale a mountainside, I could barely do it. The timing on these branches is so tight that you almost pretty much have to mash buttons to get the input to go through. But if you jump too soon, you won't get enough height to go to the next branch. So you have to mash, but in the correct way. Would you believe me if I said it took me nearly 10 minutes to do this? But anyways, I did it, and oh, god damn it. Well, anyways, after some more bad platforming on my end and another vague puzzle, I finally obtained all the blueprints for the rocket spring power-up. So, going back to Whoville, I decided to try to complete some more missions using it, specifically advancing the countdown to Xmas Clock. There are quite a few missions in the game that can only be accessed using devices that you acquire later on. Now, I'm not saying this game is giving Metroidvania, but hear me out. Well, after opening up the way and spending 20 minutes on the aforementioned cog part, I was finally ready to solve one more puzzle and finally beat the rest of Whoville. And I was excited. As far as I was concerned, this was uncharted territory for me, and what's going on? I didn't just... I think I just soft-locked the game. By jumping. I'm being serious here. I'm hitting every button I can on the controller and nothing is happening. I mean, the game isn't the most stable out there. I managed to have this happen to me. I guess the Who's really are clingy. But I wasn't expecting it to be this bad. Well, you know what that means.
You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch.
I think I fucked something up.
Schnirgasim.
Because I didn't save before the soft lock, and I really don't have the energy to replay an hour's worth of lost content, in the interest of fairness, I just cheated and went to check out the other levels to see what they were like. Believe me, I would have loved to see how these levels progressed naturally, but you've heard me talk about the game, it's really not worth it. The third level takes place in the Whoville Municipal Dump, a frequent spot for the Grinch. So frequent, in fact, that it shows up nowhere in the movie. Mount Crumpet is the dump. Like the Who Forest, it's probably a location in the Who universe, if you will, but from what I can tell, it's completely new. Big ups to the devs for thinking outside the box again, I guess. It is here where you'll do such tasks like shaving the Dump Guardian and conducting the stinky gas to Hooper's shack. I didn't spend a lot of time here. From what I could tell, it was more just the same. Bland environments, weird puzzles, and a strange lot of shocking parts here. It's strange for a dump at least. Other than that, there wasn't a lot notable, although I did get this to happen to me.
The splendor of nature surrounds peaceful Who Lake.
This went on for the rest of the area. The next and final level after this is the Who Lake, and alright, I've given this game the benefit of the doubt twice now, but I think the developers have just run out of ideas at this point. Who Forest, sure, there are trees in the movie. Whoville Dump, even though it's technically located in Mount Crumpet, makes logical sense as a location outside of the movie's canon. But a lake? At least the other levels were tangentially related to something Christmassy or Grinch related. This is just a poor man's treasure trove cove. I didn't really explore this area as much as the others. I think by this point I had pretty much given up on the game. It's just another bland, empty level with even less to look at than the others. I'm sure there's some content here, but it's clear to see that the developers have long run out of ideas, and I'm running out of notable things to say here. So, the Grinch. It's a game. It's hard to give this game a definitive review because I technically didn't beat it naturally, but one look at the final cutscene sums up pretty well just how good this game is.
Welcome Christmas, Fahuramas. Christmas Day is in our grasp. As long as we have hands to...
And it's a shame too, because I had decent hopes going into it. I knew it wasn't going to be a great game, but I had fun early on. But over time it became clear to me that this is just a rushed, nigh on unfinished cash grab for a movie game. It's buggy, bland, ugly, boring, not far off from some of the other movie adaptations of its time. And these things could be somewhat excusable if it came out like 6 years prior, but this game came out in 2000. The book on how good 3D platformers are made had well been written at that point. Spyro 3 came out the same year. This game is just bad. The Grinch may have returned Christmas to the Who's in the end, but overall, he's not going to give you back the time you wasted on this game. Well, looking at our success rate so far, it looks like the best game out of all of them is Home Alone. Things do not bode well. Well, there has to be a better Christmas game somewhere. This is a joke, right? Because I'm clearly sensing a through line of comedy here. I'm just not laughing. Well anyways, Elf Bowling, probably one of the more notorious Christmas games out there, started life as a simple PC game from the late 90s. It was decently popular for a little while actually, but quickly fell into obscurity. The most notable thing about this game is that people kept thinking it was malware, so that's probably where you should set your expectations for this game. But we're not here to talk about the PC version, as riveting as that might be. We're instead here to talk about the DS and GBA versions 7 years later. Yeah, for some reason, I guess Anstorm felt the need to port this game to the DS and GBA 7 years after its relevance. But who knows? 7 years is a long time to port a game. Maybe they've added heaps of new content or reworked the game from the ground up. Right? Well, this is just a direct port of the PC games, isn't it? They did nothing in the conversion here. Like, yeah, the PC version can be excused for being as bare bones as it is, because at least that game is just an exe file a few kilobytes wide. As for the DS and GBA versions, let's play a little spot the difference game. What is different about these three games? Wrong. To illustrate how nothing of a game this is, I'm going to explain to you, as best I can, the gameplay of Elf Bowling 1 and 2. In Elf Bowling 1, you bowl elves. You do this by using the meter at the bottom of the screen. Timing with the arrows on the meter lineup dictates where the ball rolls. The closer to the middle, the higher the chance of a strike. In Elf Bowling 2, you play against Dingle as you launch elves along the shuffleboarding deck. You have slightly more control here since you can aim the elves this time, but how forceful you launch is still dictated by a timed meter. The further you launch, the higher the score, but if you go too far, you'll fall into the water. That's it. These are some of the most bare bones games I've played yet. There's barely anything to them. And like I said, it's probably serviceable as a shitty 90s PC game, But you gotta understand, these were sold on store shelves for actual money, and the mere thought alone of this game being sold at Target keeps me up at night. This is the bare minimum for what could be considered a bowling game. There's no sense of control here. I mean, it would be cool on the DS version if you could simulate the action of rolling a ball using the touchscreen, but no, that would be too much for old elf bowling now, wouldn't it? And because everything is dictated by meters, it isn't long before you find the sweet spot and begin racking up strikes and points super quickly, so there's no real form of challenge here either. I'd comment about the crassness of the game, but that's the only thing to comment on. Oftentimes the elves will repeat something vaguely rude or lewd, and the game isn't afraid to be bloody. But other than that, there's really nothing to it. Once you remove the crude veneer this game puts on, all you're left with is a bare-bones nothing of a bowling and shuffleboarding game. If anything, it serves as a cautionary tale against the dangers of shovelware. It's probably the lowest form of shovelware I've played on a Nintendo console, and that is saying something. And I hate to say it, but shovelware kind of becomes the defining term for Christmas games from this point on. I mean, hey, just look at the eShop. I guess some developers realized that the Christmas market wasn't really viable anymore. Don't know how they got that impression, just take a look at Elf Bowling. But it just kind of fell to the wayside until budget companies got to it. And what better console to highlight this shovelware than with the Nintendo Wii? This console was notorious for being a dumping grounds for shovelware. For every Mario Galaxy out there, there's like 7 chicken shoots for this thing. So it's no wonder that a few budget Christmas titles would worm their way onto the system. That's where Panic Button comes in, a company now known for porting various games like Doom Eternal to the Switch with their own We Wish You a Merry Christmas for the Wii, and the disparity between these two games is a lot more narrow than I would have thought. What is We Wish You a Merry Christmas? I'm asking this because I played this game for 40 minutes and I still don't know. This is less of a game per se, but more so an activity pack. I guess the idea of this game is like something you'd put on the TV to tie the kids over until Christmas, and it's populated with various activities for the kids to do. There's an advent calendar, a Christmas tree, a stamp book, karaoke, etc. Are these not things you can just do at home? I might as well give it the benefit of the doubt. I am trying to review this game after all, so I checked out everything the game had to offer. As for the Christmas tree, I decided to go for a natural look. Nothing that would stray too far from what a regular Christmas tree looks like. I made it neon fucking green. There's a fireplace where you can roast marshmallows and the like. It serves no purpose whatsoever, but it's cute nonetheless. You can also make the fireplace burn all sorts of different colors, which I think I might have opened a portal to hell as a result. There's a karaoke radio which, when in Rome. Strike the harp and... There's Santa's Magical Sticker Book, which features a menagerie of clip art for you to dick around with. There's an I Spy-like game where you have to find various Christmas-specific items among a bunch of elves, with some of the best art I've seen for the Wii. There's a painting which shows you the credits of who's responsible for this. And finally, you can even write your own letter to Santa. Dear Santa, my name is Veronica Sludge 4, I'm 87 years old and I live in your walls. For Christmas, I would like 2008 Peterbilt 388 semi-truck, but of all the things in the world, I would very much like to have See Above. Before I forget, I just wanted to tell you, die in hell. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. This was probably the best activity in the game for me. Now, if this game were just the activities and nothing else, things would be looking mighty bleak, but there is a saving grace to be had. You see, this game is more akin to a minigame collection than anything, of which there are 6 to choose from. Up to 4 players are able to play a minigame at once, but every time I would ask one of my friends to join me, "Yo, do you want to play We Wish You a Merry Christmas together?" We lose connection. So it looks like I'm riding solo for this one. The first minigame, Deck the Halls, is an extremely simple match 3 game. And by simple, I mean simple. Instead of sliding pieces around to match 3 at the same tile, you just kinda set them down. And yeah, this might work for kids, I've only seen elderly people play Bejeweled after all, but it just makes it extremely boring. I think I spent at least like 5 minutes on this one. It's fun for like a minute and then wears off really quickly. The next one is Present Catch, where it's almost Christmas and presents are falling off the crowded shelves. In this one, you have to bounce these gifts over to Kris Kringle over here, and once again, it's almost comically easy. There's a pretty high margin of error here, so it's kind of hard to miss presents. Plus, you don't even have to hit them directly into Santa's bag, just kind of in a general area above it will do just fine. The physics here are especially wonky, as if you hit the presents in just the right way, they'll go yooping into Santa's bag really quickly. And it's really easy to replicate too, so most of the time you'll just be zipping around the play area and hitting presents almost perfectly above Santa's head. Like the last one, I got bored after a while and skipped into the next one, Santa's sleigh. And the third time we've seen this type of gameplay show up already, you fly over various neighborhoods and houses as you deliver gifts to children down below. It's very similar to Santa's Christmas Chaos, since you have to collect the presents first, but unlike Santa's Christmas Chaos, there's no challenge at all here. All you have to do is aim at these falling presents and hit the A button to launch them. And it's not like launching them is a timing thing too, since the gifts fall perfectly onto the houses below, with no room for failure. The biggest challenge here is having to count how many gifts go into one house. I overestimated. The next game, Reindeer Games, is probably the best game on here, and it's a clone of Doodle Jump. And because Doodle Jump is a decently fun time, by proxy, this is as well. It's the one I actually had the most fun playing, but it's really something I didn't want to play again after I failed. Then there's Hot Chocolate, where you have to match the elves' hot chocolate orders perfectly to progress. I didn't get this game for a while, but once I did, I still didn't try. It's not like I could even mess up on purpose though, since they won't let you, so I just gave up and moved to the last game here. Candy Cane Lanes, and oh my god. They never learnt. How do you review a game such as We Wish You a Merry Christmas? Because it isn't one? It has substantially more meat on its bones than Elf Bowling, don't get me wrong, but what's on display here is severely underwhelming. But I understand I'm not the target demographic for this game, as shocking as that might be, but this game is clearly intended for very little children, so it might succeed in that regard. I just have a hard time understanding the point of this game when everything, except the minigames, are things you can just do in real life. You don't get the satisfaction of opening up a small gift from an advent calendar, you don't get the real heat coming from a fireplace, you don't get the rush of sending a letter to Santa in the mail. Instead, you just get shallow imitations of it. One might argue that the main selling point of this game is the minigames, since those are things you can't necessarily recreate in real life. And for kids, that's probably true, but I have a hard time recommending it because of it, because the minigames are just really shallow and not that fun at all. It works as a budget title, but that's really all it is. A budget title. You could do far better than this. And you may not have to look far. Because on the same system were quite a few other Christmas games, and one of the ones so happens to be Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, released by High Voltage Software in 2010. They were mainly known for games such as The Conduit and ports of Saints Row 4 Enter the Dominatrix, so it's no wonder they were the ones chosen to make a Rankin and Bass game. The decision to make a game based off of an, at the time, 46-year-old movie was an interesting one, but it's one I kinda respect. There's enough here to warrant making a video game out of it. It'd probably be rather generic, but you could do some interesting stuff here nonetheless. Maybe make some of the reindeer games playable, or maybe just a platformer based around the events of the movie, or what have you. So what did they do? Well, yeah, all of the nuance I said could have been put into an adaptation of Rudolph. Yeah, this is just a bad minigame collection. Alright, another benefit of the doubt here, don't know how many I've given out for this video already, but nonetheless, maybe, perhaps a minigame collection could work for this game, because even though Lord knows the Wii was rife with these things, you never know. So after a terrifying loading screen, we're thrown into the first minigame, Holiday Helper. It's similar to Present Catch from We Wish You a Merry Christmas. In this one you must bounce thrown objects to a certain area. Light bulbs and ornaments on trees, gifts under the tree, and toys into Santa's bag. And you do this with motion controls. This is a Wii game after all, so I can't say I'm surprised. If only they worked well. Bouncing objects is needlessly cumbersome here. You move around by tilting the Wiimote left and right, which is well and good enough I suppose, but there's no sense of tactility or control here. At least with Present Catch you had some amount of control about how far and fast you were going. In this one, if you tilt left, you go straight left, no in-betweens or nothing. Now you could just control this game using the D-pad, which makes me wonder why I even bother putting motion controls here in the first place. Doesn't help that the collision on the objects is also really weird. There were quite a few moments where I'd do everything perfectly, but it still wouldn't give me a point because I was just a few centimeters off and it didn't register it properly. Compared to Present Catch, which had little to no challenge at all, this one is needlessly tasking. The next minigame, Toy Maker, sees you tossing paint onto various toys on a conveyor belt, which is oddly efficient in this world. It's super basic, all you have to do is raise or lower the Wiimote to throw paint on the toys. Until you realize that there's not really any penalty for missing, so the game just kinda turns into a waggle fest for a solid minute, and I gotta say, there ain't a lot of other games out there that can make my wrist hurt as much as this one. The next one is creatively christened Cookie Cooking, where you must do a certain action on the Wiimote to simulate baking cookies. A similar problem with the previous minigame arises here though, as the motion sensing isn't particularly precise here. I guess it works relatively well, it's far from the worst motion controls the Wii had to offer, but just look at me, I look fucking terrified. And finally, we have Saving Christmas, in which you- oh god damn it, not again. It's a little fun, I guess, since there's an incentive for being precise with where your presents line up on the houses. Getting it into a chimney will net higher points, similar to the mailboxes and Paperboy, I guess, but it is a slouch to get through. There's not really any challenge here. It may be higher than Santa's sleigh in the previous game, but that's really not saying much. Even the times I tried to mess up, I still succeeded. Frankly, I'm just tired of seeing this type of gameplay crop up. Well, that was Saving Christmas, but what's next?
All the toys have been delivered on time. Thanks to you and all your fine work, Christmas has been saved. Santa and the elves are already
what?
planning for...
That's it? 4 minigames? This game took me 13 minutes to beat. You can't do that! Especially with a game around Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer of all licenses. Where's the reindeer games, the Moon Racer, the Island of Misfit Toys, the Abominable Snowman? Oh, no. He was there. Is there even any story to this at all?
As for Rudolph and the others, let's just say they will go down in history.
That's it? I may be asking too much of this game, it is a licensed game for children after all, but even still I was disappointed by how little this game had on offer. The minigame selection screen is almost comical, there really is nothing here. I can't believe it, but I may have just found a game that somehow has less value than We Wish You a Merry Christmas or even Elf Bowling. And it's sad to say that our journey with these Christmas games kinda ends here, since it's surprisingly difficult to find Christmas games after the Wii. I'm guessing the effort in making these titles, even the shovelware ones, just wasn't lucrative enough to warrant making them anymore. And yeah, there are plenty of Christmas games on the Google Play Store or what have you, but do you really want me to review Santa Skate? Don't answer that. So I guess this is where our Christmas games gauntlet ends. 3 shovelware titles in a row, and a handful of other mediocre titles. But must we really end there? I don't like getting my videos on a negative note after all, so there has to be something worth talking about. And to find what that may be, we need to rewind all the way back to 1996 with Sega's Christmas Nights into Dreams. Okay, I know, the definition of Christmas games is really being stretched here, but after you've gone through all of these games, you kinda need a pick-me-up. So even if the final game of this video is just a reskin of another game, so be it. This game was released in December of 1996 as a promotional item. Over in Japan it was included with certain Sega Saturn bundles, while elsewhere it was given away with games such as Daytona USA Championship Circuit Edition, or as a part of a Sega Saturn magazine. And as a promotional item, it makes perfect sense. Because only 2 of the 7 levels of the original game are included here, it more or less seems like a demo for the base game. I guess the modern day equivalent to this would be DLC or maybe a free demo on the eShop or something. That's probably the reason why they included it as a bonus for the remaster of this game, since it can't really stand alone as its own product. But I'm here to judge it as a standalone product, so does it hold up? Well, it's just nights, but Christmassy. Now, the first time I've ever played Nights into Dreams was for this video specifically, and I gotta say, it's really good. It's got that really weird Sega funk to it, which gives it a unique sense of identity, and it's really addicting and fun to play. In it, you collect orbs scattered throughout the level to overload these idea captures and collect the ideas inside, before returning them back to the starting point, all the while collecting stars and flying through rings and the like. Christmas Nights into Dreams, being a reskin, carries the exact same gameplay as the base game, but replaces certain things in the game with Christmas-related objects. Stars are jingle bells, rings are wreaths, idea captures are Christmas trees, and the whole game is painted with a smattering of Christmas music and colors. It's very vibrant and colorful. Almost too vibrant. It looks good, don't get me wrong. It really nails that holiday vibe, but it just doesn't feel too great on the eyes. I guess it was because I was playing this on a relatively small window. What you're seeing right now is a blown up version from OBS. This was more so what I was dealing with. I can't really fault the game for this, but it is something I encountered during play. If you have an aversion to really bright colors, it might be best to turn down the saturation a bit. There are only 2 levels here, those being the first 2 levels of the base game, both sharing the same boss fight at the end. It's a little bit disappointing to only have one boss fight here, especially since it's one of the easier ones, but I guess I can't complain too much. After beating the 2 levels, you get a really jarring final cutscene and even more jarring credits, featuring an a cappella version of the Night's theme song, which is actually really good. I may have said Elite Beat Agents is the only game to make me weep, but you might as well add this to the list. Of course, 2 levels is awfully short to warrant this being a thing, so this game is packed to the brim with goodies to pad out the runtime. There are these presents you can unlock through playing a memory game at the end of each level, which unlocks certain bonuses. You can play and manipulate some of the songs in the game. I made Vaporwave. There's a time attack and link attack mode, a karaoke mode, movies you can watch, a collection of art for each character. All of this stuff is really superfluous, but still neat additions to the game nonetheless. One of the cooler parts, however, are the various date-specific modes you can play, replacing the Christmas theme with various holidays, such as New Year's, Valentine's Day, April Fool's, and a generic wintry theme for other days of the year. It's relatively minor in its presentation, but it's still really cool nonetheless. It's pretty rare to see games include this type of stuff. But by far, the best extra to this game is Sonic the Hedgehog Into Dreams. You can only unlock it via the memory match game, which means you'll be replaying these 2 levels a lot, which is pretty tedious, but I did end up getting it on the second try. Ignore the text on the bottom, please. But enough about how you get to Sonic Nights. How does it play? Well, this game is first and foremost a flying game. The only real gameplay you get on the ground is at the beginning of a stage or when you run out of time. You see, the controls when you're on the ground are really kinda sluggish and clunky to control. Sped up and paired with a ridiculously high jump, and you don't get good controls, that's for sure. Plus, you're exclusively grounded, so most of the stuff that's in the air is nigh on inaccessible, making it hard to get anything over a D. That also may be why the gameplay shifts to more of a time trial than anything. At the same time though, these incompatibilities make it a really fun challenge nonetheless. At its core, it's just a simple gimmicky twist on the Knight's gameplay, which is why it makes perfect sense as an extra. You're not going to be wanting this as a full game, so why not make it just a cherry on top of what is already a solid experience? Plus, once you beat the level, you get another boss, a reskin of Puffy from the original as Dr. Eggman, complete with music from Sonic CD. They really didn't have to go this hard for a game mode that doesn't even really work well, but it's still really admirable that they did. Well, after seeing most everything this game had to offer, I can confidently say it's probably one of the better games I've seen in this video. Because it's just a reskin of a good game. But for what it is, being a simple promo item, it passes the assignment with flying colors, and I highly recommend you check it out. I used an emulator for this, but you can still get most of the experience after you beat the remastered version on Steam, and I highly recommend you do. It's a really solid time. Well, looking back at the success rate of these games, the best games we've seen have been a reskin of an already good Sega Saturn game, a licensed game based off of Home Alone, and a mediocre Santa platformer. I can't say I'm not disappointed. It's a shame because I think Christmas has a lot of potential to have some pretty good games from it. And we've seen this potential in games like Home Alone or Days Before Christmas, because as mediocre as Days Before Christmas is, you cannot deny that the game is full of that Christmas charm. It's just sad seeing how much shovelware there is for Christmas. They lack the love, care, and attention that should be put into a holidays experience. But you know what playing through all these games has made me realize? It's that Christmas, being such a cheery and ubiquitous experience, can't necessarily be something that can be replicated with video games. It can be imitated, that's for sure, but you can only go so far running on vibes alone, because at the end of the day, the true feeling and meaning of Christmas comes from the shared experiences of yourself and those around you, whether that be spending time with family, sharing gifts under the tree, or whatever traditions are interwoven with your choice of celebration. It's just something you can't necessarily achieve in a video game, try as you might, especially shovelware. Happy holidays everybody, and a happy New Year's as well. Just remember that, no matter what you celebrate, true holiday cheer can only be achieved from within, not something so superficial. Merry Christmas. Oh, thank God! For me? You shouldn't have. Thanks, Santa. Christmas is ruined!